5 years ago this time, the middle of July, I found myself in knee-high boots wading through inches of water, spraying hundreds of tomato plants to try to save them from blight. At the time, my brother and I both were working full-time jobs, and we also had a produce farm where we employed around 8 people over the summertime. And we raised 10 acres of sweet corn as well as an acre of other produce. And so one day I wrapped up my day job, finished up what I was doing in the office, and headed over to the farm to check things out before heading home for the night. And as I was walking along, and some of the reason I was checking is that while we employed people to run the farm, they didn't have all the training and experience that I had in raising produce like that. And I knew that from all the rain that we've been getting that year, as well as the heat, that there was danger to the plants. And so as I'm walking along our rows of tomato plants, literally hundreds of tomato plants that we hadn't picked a single tomato off of yet, I'm seeing the telltale signs of blight on the lower leaves. And I know that with the standing water in the field, the heat coming in the coming days, that within a couple days we were going to lose this entire crop unless I did something about it immediately. So I started reaching out to people, calling people. I got myself a backpack sprayer and the spray that I needed, and I spent the rest of the night into the night hours, into the dark hours, right, in the summertime, literally with a headlamp on, just spraying every single tomato plant with spray, trying to save our crop for the year from blight that was growing on the leaves. And crazy thing about it is, after all of those hours of work, calling in favors, just doing what I needed to do in the moment, and literally just running from next thing to the next. One backpack sprayer broke in the middle, I had to get another one. In the middle of all of that, when I finally finished, I'm getting in my car to drive home for the night. And I pause and realize that everything I had done didn't matter. With multiple inches of water in the field and the heat coming, even with all the spray I had put on and all of the effort and time that I had spent, I literally was just flushing money and time down the drain, because, as was true, and it did happen, within a couple days we lost all those plants anyways. But I was in the rush of reacting to what was in front of me. And I felt this weight of responsibility for my brother, for our employees, for our customers, to save this crop. And so I was just reacting for hours that evening, going from one thing to the next, reacting to problem after problem to try to fix something that really in the end was unfixable. The problem is that today's fires are actually yesterday's problems. And as I was running from fire to fire, just trying to put out the fires within my area of responsibility, I'd lost sight of what was actually important, and the realities of what had even gotten us to the place that I was at that night. Right? And as leaders, we have to be able to make long-term changes, long-term decisions that set our organizations up for success, not only for today, but into the future. But when we find ourselves in that reactive cycle of leadership, going from fire to fire to fire, we actually are solving yesterday's problems, which isn't going to get us anywhere. I'm Nathan Good. I'm a certified executive coach with customized coaching. I also chair the board of a nonprofit that I helped to grow and develop over the last 10 years as board chair, to where we were a startup 10 years ago and now have a annual budget of over $300,000 a year. For over 10 years, my work has also been as a pastor, a senior leader within a church organization. But now as an executive coach, working with different leaders in the nonprofit sector, in the church area, as well as with multiple businesses, I walk with individuals and organizations through change. Helping individuals to think about how do they actually make long-term lasting change in their life, helping leaders think about that, but then also helping leaders to think about how do they bring long-term lasting important change and transformation within their organization or their sphere of responsibility. And what I've found over and over is that as leaders, it can be easy for us to get sucked into the fires that feel like they're burning at times. right? The things that keep us up at night, the things that give us anxiety, or maybe sometimes even that are giving anxiety to those that we're trying to lead. And so we're just going from thing to thing, trying to fix problem after problem. But today's fires are yesterday's problems. And so in leadership, it requires us to get out of that reactive cycle, that anxious reactive cycle, to take time to pause like I did that night in the car, to sit back and kind of see things for what they are, and to actually implement things that fix not yesterday's problems, but today's problems, so that tomorrow there aren't any more fires to be put out. You see, that kind of leadership requires vision. It requires actually having an idea of where you're going. It requires seeing things for what they are. And vision doesn't just grow on trees or on tomato plants. Right? Vision isn't something that can be bought or sold. Vision is something that requires creativity. It requires time for it to be grown and developed. It requires listening well, not just at a surface level of what people are saying is wrong, but actually listening to hear what's underneath the surface level and see what is really wrong. And in a leadership role, especially in the nonprofit sector, this is what gets us going, right? This is what we are, the reason that we even do what we do. We see this need in the community. We see this problem that people are facing. We see something that needs to be fixed. And so we're motivated and we work hard to fix that thing, but over time we can have mission creep, right? There's a term for it even. Where maybe over time we were starting out trying to solve something, but we've been distracted by the realities of running an organization. Distracted by the realities of just trying to get enough cash to do what we need to do next month. Distracted by the realities of employees who are unmotivated or maybe just aren't even there. We can't even hire the people that we need. Whatever the thing maybe is for you, right? We get distracted by these fires and we end up getting mission creep. We're not even focused on the thing that we wanted to be focused on to begin with, or we're not even focused on what the real need is in our community that we're trying to solve. Sometimes our mission creep doesn't even come from negative things. Sometimes mission creep can actually be because of positive things, but if we allow that mission creep to happen where we're not focused on the long term, we're not focused on what's ultimately important, it will lead to a situation where now we have problems within our organization. No longer is our organization working from a place of strength in order to solve the needs of our community. Now we are the ones who have problems. We're the ones running in our organization from fire to fire, trying to put those fires out. And so it's important as we lead organizations that we're always looking towards the future. We're always taking time to sit back and reflect, see what's most important, and see where we're going. The organization that I mentioned, the nonprofit that I'm the chair of the board for and have been for as long as we've been an incorporated board, I can't take most of the credit. 99% of the credit for the organization and what we accomplish goes to our executive director, who's the founder, who's been at it from the very beginning. But the organization is Free Fall Action Sports. We're in Quakertown and we run out of a local park. It's a borough-owned park, and we do different activities there for this, primarily for the youth that are there at the park. And so our mission is, our goal is to be building relationships, developing relationships, providing adults who care to speak into the lives of students, and then developing the skills and abilities of those people that we're serving. First on the park in action sports, but then also for life. And then we are a Christian organization, and so when the opportunity arises, we also share about faith if that's something the person wants or desires. It's not something that's required to be part of anything that we do. And so we had been operating for a number of years, but in a very, very small capacity, and we were involved in an effort that the borough had in order to raise funds to build a new skate park. So we had kind of old wooden ramp skate park, and there was a lot of factors kind of pushing towards getting a new skate park. And so over a number of years, it just exploded. We had some awesome donors that came in from the business world. We had some great grants that came in from state funding. And so it was this partnership really between churches, secular businesses, the government at a local and state level. And it was really neat to see how this partnership came together, and we had raised $1.5 million. It seemed like overnight. It was incredible. And so as that happened, and we were, telling this story and talking about this, and I believe it was at our opening event where we, had the ribbon cutting and all of this to dedicate the building and thank these partners. And after all of that was done, I pulled our executive director aside and I said, we have to be really careful here. Because this is all exciting, right? Like being part of $1.5 million fundraising campaign, and then actually seeing that come to fruition. We've got a park. We also have a building on site that we're able to actually run programs out of now. And during the summertime, we're open 48 hours a week. And so it just increased our capacity in incredible ways for what we were trying to do. But I said, I've noticed over the last number of months that we're no longer telling the story about helping students. We're telling the story about raising money. And there's nothing wrong with telling that story, right? Like that's an incredible story of just the partnership in the community and the funds coming together at the right time. But that is not what we are about, right? We were at a place where it would have been easy to fall into mission creep, where the thing that was our vision was no longer our vision, and we could have been distracted by facilities, distracted by everything that comes from that. And in order for us to stay focused on the future, and not get wrapped up in what could be the fires of today, we had to re-story the organization. And so that's something that we have actually built into the rhythm of our board, that every year at one of our board meetings in the spring, we take time to actually re-story the organization. We say, what's the story that we're telling? Right? So often story is the way that we go about casting vision, that we go about seeing what's most important. And so we intentionally have these rhythms of stepping back from the day-to-day leadership of an organization with many employees and a lot of donors and a lot of responsibilities. But we have this rhythm of stepping back from that day-to-day leadership in order to ask these fundamental questions about where are we going? Who are we? Who do we want to be? What's the story we're telling about the past? What's the story that we're telling about the future? And so I found this is true not only in leadership, right, but even in our personal lives, that there's this need for these rhythms, these intentional times that we set aside in order to kind of see things for what they are. I actually, for over 15 years, every year around my birthday, I have a personal retreat, a time that I get away just by myself to be alone, to kind of evaluate where am I at in life? What are the things that are going well? What are the things that aren't going well? What needs to be recalibrated? And I've found in my role where I'm actually the kind of the executive director figure within an organization that board meetings can be this for me. I've actually come to really appreciate writing board reports to our board, because it forces me to step back from the day-to-day leadership, step back from the fires, the things that maybe make me anxious, and just review and evaluate the last 2 months. And essentially write up this report of what is most important. What are the stories I'm not going to tell? What are the things that really don't matter from a leadership perspective for the board to be aware of to set direction for the future? What are the things that are super important that maybe I forgot to be talking about? Right? So rhythms of retreat, of getting away personally, rhythms of board meetings, and having board reports is actually a helpful tool. Sometimes in nonprofit leadership that can feel like this is something that gets in the way of the real work of the organization, but actually having these rhythms of reflection built into what we do help us to do what we're doing more effectively. Right? And I just think back to that night that I was spraying the tomatoes. Like if I would have taken just 5 minutes to step back and honestly assess the situation, I would have just gone home. Because all of this energy and resources that I was spending that evening weren't accomplishing anything. And how often is that true in our organizations as well? We're chasing the fire that's in front of us, and we're actually just wasting resources. We're burning through resources because we've lost sight of what the true problem is, and we're no longer addressing that. Another just simple tool that you can use if this is something that you realize like, wow, yeah, I'm tracking with you, and in the organization that I'm in, like I'm just caught up in the fires and it feels like the house is burning down. Or maybe it's not that, maybe it's like my to-do list is so long I can't even get through everything, or whatever it is for you. Right? I found another helpful tool is just keeping your vision and mission in front of you. So it seems maybe cheesy or tacky, but literally just having it on the wall so you can see it, and hopefully you have a good vision statement or mission statement that is a guiding tool that you can use. Having it on paperwork, so just having it on your agenda for every single meeting that you meet with the board, having it in front of you, maybe even reading through it together. Having some sort of annual rhythms within your board that when you step back and ask the question of what are the stories that we're telling? What are we saying is most important to us and what matters to us? There's a little story that kind of illustrates the point of how the life cycle that organizations easily go through, right? When we lose sight of where we're going and instead we get wrapped up in the fires that are in front of us. So imagine there's some people, I'm in Pennsylvania, I'd imagine that's where many of you are. And so, some people get together in Pennsylvania, two people, and they're friends, they're like, we're gonna go down to Disney World. And so they, get everything together, they get in the car, but it's spur of the moment, and they're headed to Disney World, right? And so if you think about this, there's kind of, it's a little bit of a kind of an illustration or a metaphor or a story, right? Like a fable around how organizations work. And so you've got the person in the driver's seat is vision. They're the ones that know, hey, here's where we want to go. And oftentimes when somebody has a vision, I'm going to go to Disney World, they bring somebody in that's important to them, the key relationship. And so maybe in your organization, as you think about, as you've gotten excited about vision, who are the people in your network that you've tapped or the relationships you've pulled in to make that vision happen? So they're headed down, they're driving, and then they get, down to North Carolina, and they're like, we didn't pack any food. And like, we aren't really good planners, hence why we're just spur of the moment doing this. And one of them's like, hey, you know what? I've got some friends down here in the Carolinas. Like, what if we stop in and they get in with us, right? And so they bring somebody in who's great at meal prep, somebody else that's good at scheduling. And if you think about this within organizations, right, this is like the programs or the products of the organization, and the management, the ones who oversee the operations of it. All right, so you've got vision in the driver's seat, relationships in the passenger seat. You've got the products or the programs in the back seat along with the manager. And we're all headed to Disney World. We're going for it. And then as they're driving, vision, he's been driving the whole time, or she has been in the driver's seat the whole time, and is like, you know what, I'm getting tired. I need a little break. And so if you think about, right, you've got vision in the driver's seat. You've got relationships in the passenger seat. They're just the buddy along for the ride. You've got the programs, the food person. You've got the manager, the scheduler. Who's the one that you're going to be like, this is the person that should get in the driver's seat and drive? Just think about the story. And right, of course, the person who handles the schedule, who's detail oriented, who's good at the day-to-day, here's what we're going to be doing each day, like, it makes sense. They're the one to take the wheel. And this is what happens in organizations, right? You have a visionary, or maybe even just a vision, and as you're going, you add management along the way, day-to-day operations, and eventually the vision gets tired and the manager takes over. But the problem in this story is that vision forgot to tell the buddies they picked up in the Carolinas where it was they were going. And so vision gets tired, crawls in the back seat, starts taking a nap. The manager gets up, starts driving. Next thing you know, vision wakes up and they're in Texas. They never even made it. Right? But so often this is what happens in our organizations, that vision gets tired, management takes over the day-to-day operations, focusing on just putting out the fires that are in front of us, and we end up, we're not even on track anymore, we're not going where we need to be. So some ways that we can handle this, right, is just doing good visioning, but also thinking about succession planning. The reality is that vision is going to get tired at some point in time. Who's going to take the reins next? And so an important exercise is just make an organizational chart of today. What does your organization look like today? Your board leadership, your executive director, other program directors, all the way down through your entire organization. And then make that same organizational chart for 10 years from now. Realistically, what holes are there between today and then? And if you don't want to just be chasing fires, like, part of the role of leadership is actually thinking about, how do we plug those holes? What are we doing today to set us up for tomorrow, instead of solving yesterday's problems today? You see, today's fires are yesterday's problems. And I realize, you're in leadership, like you can't just let the house burn down, right? You can't just let all the fires burn. But when you're running from fire to fire, sometimes you need to take that time to step back and say, why did these fires start to begin with? Sometimes you have to call in the fire trucks, you have to call in outside help and say, we're overwhelmed, we're in over our heads, can you help us figure this out and fix this? Sometimes you have to actually choose to let part of the house burn down in order to save the parts that you can save before it's too late and you can't save any of it. But all of these things, they require stopping, pausing for just a moment in order to reassess, what is the goal? What's the purpose? Where are we heading? And so I'd encourage you, step out of that cycle of reactive leadership. Lead with purpose. Your people need it.